Good afternoon, everyone. This is Brian Sweat, and I'm the ACCTivate product manager. Today, we're going to spend about 1 hour going over a lot of tips and tricks for ACCTivate users. This is not going to be an introduction to ACCTivate and how to use the software or really focused on any one module or feature. I'm going to just try to go through a variety of tools that can help you using ACCTivate on a daily basis. And we'll cover a lot of information, and I'll just show a little agenda for today. The topics that we'll try to cover today will be user interface and keyboard shortcuts, some tips for managing crystal reports in ACCTivate, how to use email and document templates, which I'll show you in the software as a demo, then some business activity suggestions, how to do SQL Server backups, and make sure you backing up your reports properly, and then also some additional tips that are a little bit outside of ACCTivate, but showing you some options for remotely accessing your computers to get to ACCTivate and other software, and then some other tools that I think are relevant to this software. One of the first things we'll do is just go through an introduction to some of the advanced user interface options. So for a lot of you that have used ACCTivate for many years, you may not realize that you can change the icon bar. So I want to just point that out. In the software, once you're logged into the ACCTivate desktop, you can actually grab the icon bar and move it away from the top of the screen to the left, to the right, or on the bottom. And I'll show that as we jump into the demo. And we can also customize the icons for each individual user. You could just put on the icons that that user needs to see. So if you're in purchasing, you might only see purchase order, receipts, purchase invoice, and you don't really need to see the sales quote and quick quote and some of those tools. So each user can have a custom icon bar with exactly the items they need. Also, we have some tips on window size and position. ACCTivate will remember the last place that you left the window when you close it. And also, one little known secret, if you need to make the window a little smaller, you can actually double click in the background of the window, the gray area of the window, and it will resize to a couple different sizes, going between the full screen, full size, down to like an 800 by 600 pixel size, and then another in the middle. And then one of the most common tips and tricks that I can give anyone that's doing data entry or using ACCTivate all the time is to explain some of the shortcut keys for accessing toolbars, menus, and actions within Windows. So we'll go through the shortcuts, and maybe you'll find some that you didn't know about before. All of these are documented on our help site, but I'll go through just to make sure you guys have seen some of the function keys we can do, just some things to keep in mind, and maybe a couple of these will pique your interest. So first of all, the function keys at the top. Some windows take advantage of some of the extra functions, but the normal ones that work from every screen, no matter what window you're on, you can press F1 and it will take you to our new help site. If you press F1, it'll open the help information for that page on our website. F4 can be used to show the lookup windows. So if you're on the customer window and you want to browse for a different customer, simply press F4 if you're in the customer field, and it will show the lookup window. And that also works for any drop-down fields. So if you're on a drop-down, instead of using your mouse to go click on the drop-down, then click on an item in the drop-down, you can hit F4 and then use your cursor keys, your arrow keys, to go up and down. F5 is the refresh key in Windows that will refresh any saved document. If you're in the middle of editing it, you can't refresh. But if you have trouble, like with users changing data below you or on another computer, you can hit F5 to make sure you're looking at the most recent information. The alternate is a way you can show some shortcuts. The enter key in a lot of the data grids that will take you to the next row. So tab and shift tab, the ones below it, are probably more pervasive throughout the ACCTivate software, letting you move between fields. But be sure to also try the enter key when you're in the data entry grids, such as an inventory receipt, a sales order, or purchase order. And then also just on text fields, the home and the end keys. If you want to move from the beginning of a field to the end, be sure you're comfortable with holding down home or tapping home or end. And then also if you hold down shift and you hit home or end, it will select all the text from your point on the cursor to the beginning or the end of that text field. Then we have a lot of control shortcut keys. I'm not going to read through all these. These are pretty much variations on the same type of actions. So creating new, toggling the edit mode or saving data, printing, Control P, all of these shortcut keys are available on most of the Activate windows. And the way you'll see those and know which ones do each function, if you hover your mouse over the toolbar, there will be a little tooltip, a little pop-up message will appear that tells you what the shortcut key is for that button. Okay. And then toward the bottom, Control Tab is another kind of hidden gem that lets you quickly switch between windows within Activate. So if you're familiar with Alt Tab, a lot of people know about that. Alt Tab lets you switch between windows within the operating system, but Control Tab is just within the small windows within the Activate desktop. And then some Windows key shortcuts, which I think are definitely applicable to other software. This is not really just an Activate tip, but Windows D is a way to just toggle between your desktop and the applications that are open. I use that a lot when I just want to look at something on my desktop or find a file that I just downloaded. Windows L, anytime you leave your desk or you go to lunch or you leave for the day and you want to keep everything running, you want to keep your open Activate software, your open Outlook, you just want to lock it so no one else can get to your computer, just quickly hold down the Start button or the Windows key on your keyboard and then tap L, and that will lock your computer. Another thing that I found out probably within the last year or two, I think they added this maybe in Windows 7. If you hold down the Start key, the Windows key, and you press any of the numbers on your keypad 1 through 9, it will launch that application that's in your taskbar. So if I look in Windows, if I have three or four programs running, if I hold down Windows and I tap 2, it's going to open the second application from the left on the taskbar. So that's a really nice little shortcut. If you keep your applications pinned in the same position on your taskbar, that could be a really nice way to switch back between two different programs, rather than switching through all the different programs that are running at the same time. And then something for you Windows 8 users, I've noticed a lot of frustration when switching back and forth to the Start menu. It is nice to know you can just tap the Windows key at any point to display the Start menu. If you're on Windows 7 or older editions, maybe that's not as important because the Windows key is pretty easy to tap. But in the newer version of Windows, you'll find that it's a little easier than trying to drive your mouse down into the corner of your desktop. And then Windows up, down, left, and right. Those are some really nice tools to maximize, restore windows, and then snap them to the left and right. And arrow snap is the term that Microsoft uses, and that's kind of an obscure word. But I just took a picture earlier of my desk just to show you an idea of how this could work. So if you've got two monitors, this is especially important. In fact, if you don't have two monitors, I would recommend you look at getting an extra monitor. I have two 1080p monitors. I think they're $150 a piece. It's a pretty good price. And it lets me run a lot of different apps at one time. And I can also snap them to different regions on my screens. So built into Windows without any third-party software, you hold down the Windows key and then hit the left, it will take the active window and snap it to the leftmost region of your screen. So it will split your screen in half, 50%. And with a single monitor, that's nice because it lets you look at two things at one time. But if you have two monitors, it actually lets you run 4 different applications, a full screen, easily docked, pinned to the edges of the screen. And you don't have to grab the corners of each window and resize windows, which is real tedious. So definitely experiment with the Windows and the left-right arrow keys, and that started in Windows 7. Of course, it's available in Windows 8 desktop as well. Okay, so I'm kind of rushing through just the Windows stuff. These are general tips and tricks that you can find documentation on all over the web. It's just a kind of introduction to using the desktop and the shortcut keys. Some other shortcuts we have in the software that can help you out using Activate that are not really part of any module that just wanted to go through. Number one is being able to look at the current users list. So from the help menu, you can choose View Current Users, and that'll give you a list of all the users that are in Activate, and it auto refreshes every few seconds. So if you're waiting for everyone to close out of Activate to do a software update, or you'd like to back up and you want to make sure everybody's finished up, you can open that View Current Users list and look at that. It does auto refresh every 5 or 6 seconds, but at any time you can hit F5 to refresh that list. Another hidden secret in Activate, and I ran into this about a week ago. We had a tech support request about someone that was changing their Windows system date. And I really would discourage you from changing your Windows date. I realize that there are some things in some applications where you really you have to change your Windows date to force it to do something, but we really would frown on that, and you can set a default transaction date in Activate. And we'll show you in just a minute, you can actually open the icon bar and you can add a shortcut called Set Date, and it will let you set the default date for new transactions. And this is only for accounting transactions, so the timestamps on when you created the record in our database and on the screen in certain areas will still be today's date. This will be the transaction date for like an inventory transaction, like a receipt or an inventory transfer, or the default date for an invoice. The other thing is learning to view the Activate log file. If you need to send that to the support team, or if you're curious about when a user had an error message or when they last backed up, from the help menu you can go to Activate Support and then do Email Activate Log. Now, it was designed to send the log to our support team, but a few years back we added some options here where you can actually choose the view option, which will open it immediately, or you can open the folder, which will let you browse through all the log files on your system. Now, the log date only really works for the daily exception log. If you choose to view the synchronization log, it's going to open the most recent sync log. If you'd like to view older sync logs, we keep a record of 10 synchronization logs, so you can choose Open Folder and then look for those sync log files. Another item that is often overlooked, I think, is the screenshot tool. Right from the main icon bar, if you're not sure what that does, it will take the active window, such as a sales order or the customer window, and it just literally takes a screenshot of that window and sends it to your printer. So if your printer, if you have it set to like a PDF writer, you could create a PDF file, or if you just want to send it to your printer and then leave it on your desk and mark it up for someone, you can do that as well. So rather than creating a Crystal report or an Excel query or something to get data, one option is to just simply set up the screenshot button and use that. Okay, and that goes to your default Windows printer. These next two items kind of go together. So rather than doing a custom report to see, your top balances for customers, or looking at transactions for a product sorted by the biggest quantity or the largest amount, a lot of our grids support sorting. So you can simply click the title of the grid column. In this case, on my little screenshot there, it's balance due. And if you toggle it once, it will sort it in ascending order with the smallest number at the top. And if you sort it again, it'll have the largest number at the top. So again, that sorting is saved per user. So if one of you sorts your business alerts by balance, you will see it that way, and another could have it sorted by customer's name alphabetically, and it'll remain in that sequence. And at any time, if you mess up one of these grids, you can right-click on the grid, and there's an option to restore settings, and that will put it back to our default settings, which you shouldn't have to do that, but just in case, we do have the option for that. And kind of to tie those together, one thing you can do as well, once you've sorted the grid and you get the data exactly the way you like it, there is an option to print the grid. So if you right-click on those sortable grids, you can choose Print Grid, and it will prompt you for what printer to send that to, and it will format it kind of in a tabular format. Looks like an Excel spreadsheet, but it allows you to send that to a printer. Again, if you've got a PDF writer, you could also create a file that has that grid data. Okay, now I'm going to move into a couple topics here on Crystal Reports. One of the things that I would strongly recommend you do, again, we have an entire webinar dedicated to creating custom reports, so I'm not going to go into details on how to use Crystal today, but one of the things is that for an admin is once you've set up those custom reports, I would encourage you to edit the notes, the description, and make sure you add a useful, informative description of what the report is. So you can actually edit it in the report selector, just hit the little pencil icon, and you can type in some notes about the reports. And if you're like our company, we've got a couple hundred custom reports, and sometimes you can't just use the title of the report to describe what's in the report. So rather than running 5 or 6 reports to find what you need, just put in some notes that'll help other users understand what the report is. The other thing that we should go through is when to use prompts or parameters. This came up after our last Crystal Reports webinar. The question is, Crystal has a parameter and ACCTivate has a prompt. What's the difference? Well, the main thing is that the parameters, it passes the value to the report. So we don't do anything to filter the data explicitly. The value goes into the report, and you can do whatever you need to with that parameter value. So if you have a report that you need to take a prompt that doesn't really need to filter data, it just needs to display some information on the report, use a Crystal Report parameter. And there's a lot of information in Crystal Reports documentation on that, and we can help you out as well. The selection prompts that are in ACCTivate's configuration management can be used to filter data only. That's all they do. So you can add a prompt such as customer name or customer type, and then when you run the report, ACCTivate will filter the results by adding that to what Crystal calls the record selection formula. So again, that's just a tip, is being aware that there are 2 different ways to pass values to Crystal, prompts and parameters, and you need to understand the difference between those if you want to create a really nice report. And then lastly, one of the things in regards to printers, again, we talked about the screenshot goes straight to the printer, but in ACCTivate, most of the reports you print are going to go to the default printer in Windows. So whatever you set as your default printer will be the destination for a report. Now, what you can do is also configure printer assignments. And the most common use for this would be to have all invoices print to one printer, maybe all packing lists print to the printer in the warehouse. So this allows each computer has its own set of printers. As you know, your workstation is where you actually set up those printers. So what you'll need to do is define for a report, such as a pick ticket or packing slip or purchase order. In the report catalog and configuration management, there's a printer assignments tab, which allows you to assign a specific printer. For this user, for this workstation, you can have that report always go to a specific printer. Another question we get a lot is about when to use how the dashboard reports work and whether I should use the dashboard or not for this report. One thing that's important is the dashboard is designed for smaller reports. So any report that you define as a dashboard panel in the report catalog will appear on the dashboard. So I can add a report designed for 8.5 by 11 or A4, whatever your document size is. The problem with that is we don't display scroll bars, and it's not designed for pagination for multiple page reports. So if you are using the dashboard, I would encourage you to design those Crystal reports in the Crystal Report Designer software. Make sure they are designed for a small section of the dashboard. Of course, you can do full screen dashboard reports, but it's really just not designed for that, and we've had customers that have struggled trying to make that work. So if you need to show like an inventory stock on hand report on your dashboard, I would encourage you to make a copy of that report and then minimize the amount of data so it fits nicely in a smaller area on the screen. Another thing that comes up about getting data out, we've talked about getting to the default printer and a specialty printer for different reports. But another thing that I recommend is instead of just printing it straight to a physical printer, why don't you consider some of the export options? So instead of printing a 30-page report, maybe it would be better to export it as a Adobe Acrobat PDF file or an Excel or CSV file. One of the things I noted here is you'll see here it says Microsoft Excel data only. When you go to export a report, you'll have choices on the Excel selections, and one of them says data only. I think it's really important to do that option. For most applications, data only is better because it keeps the numbers and the dates in their original format. I found that if you use the regular basic Excel export, you may find that your currency amounts, your numbers may be converted to text. So the Excel spreadsheet may format the column as text, and then you'll have trouble if you want to create a formula field or a running total. It may not work because it's expecting a number rather than text. Okay, moving kind of past Crystal Reports, I'm just going through some other topics real quick, and then we'll jump into the ACCTivate software for a few minutes. I'll go through some of these, and then we'll also go back for a couple more topics before we close up. So I want to move into one last area, which is business activities. And if you don't have the module, I'll try to get through this pretty quickly, but we do recommend the business activity management for any companies that need to track RMAs, service, sales leads, anything outside of the basic accounting. Business activities are a great tool. And one of the things I wanted to mention is that some of the advanced tools in the business activity review. One thing to be sure that you're aware of is that you can group and sort by multiple columns. So in the screenshot on the right, I've showed I took the status field and I dragged it up above the grid, which then creates a group for each status for my entire list. So all my authorized RMAs and my pending RMAs or service requests are going to be grouped together. And even within each group, then you can also, as I said earlier, you can tap on the heading where it has the field name to do a sort. And if you hold down Shift, you can sort by the due date in this example. If you hold down Shift and you click another column, it will do a multiple column sort. So you can actually sort by more than one column in sequence. Also, you can use the field chooser to select which columns are displayed on the business activity review. By default, we do not display every single field, so you'll have to use that column chooser to add in custom fields and other options. Also, we added the last action information. I think that was added in ACCTivate 8.0, and what that does is it just takes the date and the note from the last email, note, or any time entries that are made on the business activity, and it will allow you to sort so you can see which business activities have had recent activity, and more importantly, which ones have not had recent activity. So if you're trying to find a service request or a sales lead that may have gone stagnant or there's some problem with it, you can sort by the last action field. And then one of the other hidden items on business activities is the ability to have custom related items. And that allows you to take a service request or an RMA and link it to anything that has a URL or a folder. So for example, in our demo company, we have Google Maps and we also have Google Search and Amazon Product. And what that means is when you add the link, it'll prompt you for the address for a Google Map or the Amazon Product ID, the URL, and then it will show it in the related items list and allow other users to have a single click to actually open that information. And some other ideas, maybe use it for SharePoint pages if you're using SharePoint or a team site. You might also use it for UPS or FedEx tracking. So if you want to copy and paste the tracking URL, you could put that in as well. Now, switching gears kind of into more of the IT administrator rules and ACCTivate, I really want to hit this home. Our tech support team will thank me for this discussion. It's good to understand the database and backup files that ACCTivate uses. Even if you're not a database administrator, which I assume most of you are not, it's good to just understand there are two basic concepts to SQL Server. In SQL Server, we have the raw data files, which are commonly referred to as the MDF and the LDF files. So the master data file and then the log file. Those files are always in use and they're locked by the database engine. So when you post a transaction, it writes directly to the data files. Now, the problem with that is some people will try to back those files up. Now, it's okay if SQL Server was shut down cleanly. There are some exceptions where getting the MDF file may be okay. But it's definitely frowned upon, and we do not recommend that you back up those files. Instead, we recommend that you set up a backup schedule, or you do manual backups daily, or however often you'd like to do them, and generate a BKF or a BAK SQL Server backup file. And then that backup file is a complete database backup that can be restored onto a new server, or if there's a failure with your database or your hard drive fails, you can restore that BAK, that BKF file, reliably restore it. So one of the things to do is if you are using a third-party backup provider, such as an online backup service, or if your IT company has set up a tape backup or a hard drive-based backup, just make sure that they know that you have a Microsoft SQL Server database, and make sure they support SQL Server. There are some consumer level, consumer grade backup systems that do not support SQL Server. So again, just check with your backup provider and make sure that they are properly backing up the SQL Server database backup files. And then lastly, in terms of backups, keep in mind that the custom reports, the crystal report files that you create, are not in the database. They're actually in your file system. So you'll need to be sure to back up the custom reports directory, which is by default located in the ACCTivate directory, the ACCTivate data directory. There's a reports folder, and then below the reports, there's a folder called custom. And in that custom folder, those files, you need to make sure you're backing them up. And I would say, make sure they're in your daily tape backup or online backup, but also maybe every once in a while just grab a copy of all those files and move it to your workstation, or keep a copy of them somewhere just for safekeeping. Because if you've paid a consultant or an IT person to actually create those reports for you, you really don't want to lose them. Okay, I'm going to take a break here real quick, and we're going to switch into ACCTivate. I just wanted to go through a couple topics that we talked about. Not going to spend a lot of time on that, and then we'll get back to some other ideas and tips and tricks. So kind of going back to where we started, we talked a little bit about the icon bar at the top. And so just to show you the actual demo, anytime if you would like to move this, and the most common reason I see people doing it is they want to move the icon bar instead of being across the top. They'd like to put it on the left side of the window. And there's a good reason for that. If you do that, it gets you more vertical space in your windows. So if we were running on a smaller screen like a tablet, like an iPad or a netbook, a small low resolution laptop, you may want to get that extra couple pixels to the top. So you can move your icon bar to the left. Now at this resolution, it shows exactly all the items. One of the other things we talked about is removing or customizing your icon bar. There are two ways to do that. You can right click on the icon bar and choose customize, and then at that point click and drag icons off the icon bar. So if I don't want the product and purchase order, I can just grab them and move them off the screen. The other thing you can do, which is pretty easy and probably a better way to do it, you can hit this tiny little blue sliver down here at the bottom, which is also on the far right, and that will allow you to quickly add or remove buttons on the icon bar. So if I choose icon bar, you'll see all the items that we can put here, and there's a whole bunch of stuff. So if we get back into sales, let's say I'm not into purchasing, I don't do anything with products, then I can add a couple more options here. So let's say I put the sales quote. You can also choose whether you even want to show the icon bar. So if you right click and choose customize, in the middle of the screen you'll see options to even disable the icon bar. That's the only thing you can take off. We don't allow you to turn off the menu bar, because if you turn it off you won't be able to get to everything in the software. Okay, and then you can also click down here at the bottom, which would also be at the right if you had it at the top. You can choose to add, remove buttons, and then see all the items that are available for the icon bar. And as I started to show earlier, the sales, if you're a salesman, you may not want to see any of the purchasing items, but you can add sales quote, print quotes, sales order, maybe print orders, and then turn off anything that you don't need to deal with. Okay? So we've got a custom icon bar now. And just to keep in mind, the icon bar is per user, so each user can customize their own icon bar, and it does not affect the other users. So we're still looking at the business alerts, one of our default windows that comes up. Just to illustrate the sorting that we talked about earlier, you can just simply click the column header to sort that. You can also move columns, so if you want to move the due date to be over by their name, that's fine. And those changes will persist per user. So if I change this, that won't affect other users, just like the other options. Okay. And while we're on a screen that has a couple toolbar buttons, as I said in the presentation, you can hover over the toolbar button to see the shortcut key, and it will follow it in parentheses. So refresh is F5. Just simply press F5 and that will refresh the screen. And that's even more important when we're dealing with data entry screens and windows such as the customer. We have quite a few icons on the toolbar. Simply hover over them and you'll see that a new customer is Control N, edit is Control E, save is Control S, so on and so forth. So again, definitely learn those shortcuts and it will save you a lot of time. Okay, once we're actually in a document, there's a lot of shortcut keys and tools and everything. We did talk about the data entry shortcuts. Those are pretty self-explanatory. I think you'll learn to do that. But one of the key demos that I do a lot is the ability to start a transaction without using your mouse. So if you hold down the Alt key, that will give you direct access to all the main menus. And if you were quick to notice, it actually underlines all the main menus. So you can see an underscore in front of each letter. It's usually the first letter. So sales will be S, purchasing is P. So if you hold down Alt and then you can type S, then since the Alt key was held down, you'll see underlines under each of the shortcut keys. They call these accelerator keys. So Alt S O for sales order will take you directly to the sales order window. And then from there, again, I don't need to click the mouse, but just to illustrate, if we hover over, Control N is our new order. So I can press Control N to start the new order, and it puts me directly in the customer name field. Once I'm in the customer name field, as I shown earlier in the presentation, we can press F4 is our lookup shortcut. So I press F4 and that displays the customer lookup window. I can quickly type in what I need to find, like Eastside Motors. I'll just type in East. It'll be selected automatically. Now, usually you might move your mouse down to hit select. Just to illustrate, there's a couple ways we can select it. I can double click the grid and that will automatically select it and return me back to the order. I can type the select key, which is great, easy way to do it, or I can hit return. So once an item is selected in the grid, which it will automatically select the best choice based on your typing the filters, then I can press enter. Now, just to go back, if I backspace that out, if I type Abercrombie and I want to clear, instead of just hitting backspace 8 or 9 times, we can also hold down Shift and then hit the Home key, and then that will select the entire value, and then I can type over that. So there's a lot of shortcut keys. If you learn this stuff, it'll make it a lot easier to do data entry and Activate. Okay, so now we've selected our best customer, and I want to start entering items, line items on the order. Now I can use my tab keys to move through all the main fields at the top. So I can go tab, will work forward, hold down Shift tab, works backwards through the field. So if I miss a field and I want to go back, just simply press Shift tab. Now to move to the line items, you'll notice the Detail tab has an underline under the D, an underscore. And what that means is I can hold down Alt. Anytime we see the underline, we can use the Alt key, and I can do Alt D, and that will move me directly into the data entry grid for the detail lines. And the product ID, if I know the product ID, I can type it in. If I know the UPC, I can type it in, the alternate product ID, or I can use a barcode scanner and scan any of those values. Or if I want to use the lookup, again, I can press F4. That will take me to my product browser, and I can type any values in the description, and it will filter it automatically. Okay. If I want to switch to search a different field without using my mouse, I can switch over here, and I can type the first letter of the data field, like product ID, and that will switch the entire grid into product ID instantly. At that point, I can type a couple of characters to filter the product, and then hit return at any time to select the item in the grid. At this point, my cursor is placed directly in the quantity ordered, where I can put in, let's say they're going to add 100 units. And at this point, I could press enter to move me to the next row. I could type the next product ID, simply press enter again. There's a pop-up. So anytime there's a pop-up, I don't want to have to pick up my mouse and dismiss it. I can read it, and I can simply hit escape, and that will close that window. So we've got B20, B10. Now if I just type the product ID and press enter, it's going to order 1 unit at the customer's default price. If I want to change the price, I can type the product ID and hit tab instead. Again, escape or enter to get rid of that pop-up. And I can move over to the price field and type a new price. And then press return or enter, and it moves me to the next product ID on the next field. Now I'm finished with this order. It's a pretty simple $200 order. If I want to save it, again, use my shortcut keys. I can do Control S, and that will save the order. And now it's ready to be printed, which is Control P. And now I can print this out to the printer or PDF it and be done with it. Now to close out of these windows, because I'm finished, I can hold down Control and then type F4, and that will close the windows. Okay, so a lot of topics on here, just trying to get through the shortcuts. data entry is very different on different screens, but the sales order is probably one of the most complicated forms, and I can definitely enter a sales order without ever picking up my mouse and do most of the common use of that. The other thing to talk about while we're here on the desktop, we talked a little bit about Crystal Reports, and I think it's good to just show some of the things we can do with Crystal Reports. So we talked about doing report filters. So we're going to start in configuration management real quick and go down to our report catalog. Now this does require sysadmin permission. So for those of you that don't have access to this, you'll need to have somebody that's a sysadmin set this up. And so if I go and I look at my inventory reports, you'll see, here's all of our standard, valuation report, stock on hand. And there's some basic notes here explaining what the report does. So if I go to my selection prompts, that's where I can add in filters for the Crystal report. Now, Crystal Reports has parameters for more advanced tools, but doing basic filters, this is a really good place to do that. So if I want to add an additional filter, so when I'm running this report, which just on the Properties tab, this is the Stock on Hand report, but let's say that I only want to filter this report for a specific color of product, or what's something that might be a little more easy, maybe a sales category. So I can do a sales category, hit the little lookup button here, or press F4, as you know, for our lookup windows, and this will allow you to filter and to add a filter for any field that's available on that report or in the data views for that report. So I can scroll down, choose sales category, and hit select. Okay, and then the database type will be selected here as well. It's pretty simple. It's just a text field. You'll have to type in the text and be done with it. Now some fields we actually have drop downs for, such as product type. So if I hit F4 here and I select the product type field, it's going to automatically know that that's the product type field. So when I run the report, I'll have the option of filtering just by simply using the drop down. Now before I save that, another thing I can do is go to the printer assignment and assign a specific printer. Every time I print this report, I want it to go to a special printer. Now the workstation name, you can press F1 to get some help on this, but this will be your computer name, which mine is Brian, and then I would have my printer selection. I'll do the lookup, and I'll say that this printer, instead of going to my default PDF writer, maybe I want this to print to the brother printer that's over in the support office. We don't do a lot of printing here, we only have a handful of printers, so I'll just easily choose one of those and be done with it. As an admin, you probably want to do this from the workstation that you're configuring, because if I go over to Zach's computer, he's going to have a different set of printers, most likely. So I would recommend that you actually go to each workstation and configure the printers manually. But we do have an option for network printers that are set up on every computer in your office. If you do have a network printer, let's say we have this fax server that we have that I've never used, I don't think. You can actually choose workstation star, which is a wildcard, meaning that any computer that tries to print this report, we would want to send it to the fax server. Now, of course, I'm not going to save that. I just wanted to illustrate that you do have a catch-all, a way to do that for all computers. Okay, that's saving. Now, when I go to print that report, of course, we'll have the selection parameters options ready to go. Okay, and at the time you run the report, if you're not sure and you'd like to add notes to these reports, as long as you are logged in as a sysadmin, you can always change the description just by hitting this little pencil right here. That will allow you to actually type in some updates here. You can put a little name on there if you customize it or something. So anybody running it knows this is like your special report. And when you select it, since we added those custom filters, you'll see the product type right here. We can say equal to other or supplies. It's just a shortcut to help you know what the product type codes are. Okay. Once we preview the report, one of the last things I wanted to show you in Crystal, the print button is the most commonly used when you want to print it to a printer, but the first button is the export. And there's three options that I talked about earlier. Number one is the Adobe Acrobat. The second one I would recommend would be the Excel option with data only. And again, the reason for that is it keeps the proper data types for the report. And then lastly, if you want to export as a text or CSV file, you can do that down below at the bottom. But the other thing we can do here is, in addition to exporting it as a file, which will save it to your disk, you can choose application. And what will happen is, instead of it just saving the file and then you having to go find it, browse Windows Explorer, it will actually create the PDF and then it will open it in the software that you have set up to handle that file type. And that's most commonly used with Excel. If I want to open this report in the application, it's going to open it in the Excel software. Now the options here, you've got a couple options, whether you want to export it with minimal, like no page headers, none of that, which I would recommend if you're just working with the raw data. So I would choose minimal for most people. If you did need to email it to someone or you want it to be more formal and have headers, then custom or typical is probably a better option. But we'll just open that up. That should open directly in Excel. I have version 2010. The columns aren't sized properly, they're just the defaults. So as an Excel tip, I usually select the entire worksheet and then double click anywhere between any of the columns. So when you see this icon that looks like a little bar, a little cross, it will resize all of the columns to match the data that's in the report. So it's a good way to do your totaling, to get all this information. So instead of just using the raw number that came from Crystal, you could do the same thing here by just doing a formula to kind of sum that up. Although I have some problem. So again, data minimal option, data only is a really good way that you can actually use Excel formulas. If you didn't do that, this may have exported as text with the currency symbol and a period and would not have worked as well. We've got a few more minutes to go through just some email and document templates, and then I'll spend the rest of the presentation going through some remote desktop and then close up with a couple of other items. One thing that we've talked about in the CRM webinar that we did last month, and we've covered it mostly with our new accounts if they have questions about how to set up email. I'll show you some tips and tricks on how to set up email templates for doing common messages to your customers or your vendors. If I print a report, you'll see you get all these data fields, but this is just an internal report for our use. Now, if we look at these data fields, you'll see that all of the data fields are actually in the data views, such as the field name customer dot and then the field name credit limit, for example. This would be the price code, the contact name. So we have all these data fields in the database. Now, one thing you might want to do is send an email to the customer and include some of those data fields in the actual email message. So one of the common templates might be to create like a welcome email to new customers. So on the email message, I will choose template and then manage templates, create a new template. Let's call this the welcome email. And we'll put a little message here and we'll call it welcome, and then we have database fields that we can type in here. And the way the fields work, you use curly braces. So they look like little parentheses, but they have the little pin in the middle. And if you want to know what those fields are, you can press F1, which will take you to our help site and let you look at those message fields that are available. So this will give you instructions on that. I almost always have to go to our message template fields because I just can't memorize all the different fields. So if I'm dealing with customer, I will click on customer fields, and then I'll be able to scroll through and see all of the fields that are available. So we have their company name, their phone number, the balance, all of this information that's available for the customer. So we'll start it off and do some kind of salutation, like a first name type field. And then you might want to say your salesperson will be, and then you could actually put in like a database field like salesperson, I think it's salesperson name. Just do something like that. Now with message templates, one of the things I want to do is make sure I assign this email template to be for only certain types of documents. If you're going to use template fields, you need to say it's a customer email or it's a business activity email or some other module. Okay, so we'll do the company name here, and I think that'll work. And if you want the template to be available for all users, by default they're personal and no one else in your company can use this email template. So you will need to check the box and save it if you want other users to get to it. Okay, so now I can choose the welcome email. I accidentally created two. And you'll see that it says, welcome Abercrombie and Smith. Thanks for your order. We really appreciate your business. And it put her first name here at the top It pulled the salesperson's name, which actually came from QuickBooks or Intact or your accounting system, and it says they will be in contact with you shortly. So you don't have to type the email every time. And so just to quickly go through how we would do that now, I could just simply hit the little email button here, choose the template, and then it will automatically fill in the message, and then I can send that email to Christy. And the same functionality exists for sales orders, purchase orders, business activities. A lot of the documents in ACCTivate have this functionality. One of the most common use of document templates, I think, will be for sales orders or purchase orders. That's our main thing that we have the copy function for. So what it allows you to do is take maybe an existing quote. So here's a quote this customer got last year, and I can simply hit the copy function, the Control-Shift-N, and that will create a new quote, a copy of it, and you can either say, do I want to do it for the same customer, or you can clear that and choose a new customer. So using this as a template, it allows you to go into the quote and copy their last order as a new order, or their last quote as a new quote, and then you can modify the changes, and that will only affect the new order. So I can go in here, and let's say they're not going to get that item today, so I'll zero it out, zero this out, and they're just going to order 2 blue task chairs and 1 executive desk. They don't want the manager chair, and they don't want the desk set. So I've got that quote that I leave in my system as an open quote, maybe with no customer or a future date, and I can just simply copy that at any time. Now, one of the things that you can also do with those quote templates is if you zero out items on the quote, one of the things we do is when you convert it to a scheduled order or a booked order, it will delete any of the items that the customer did not want. So when I switch it to scheduled, you'll see that the order that pops up here only has the 2 items, and the line numbers are resequenced. So again, just a really nice shortcut. You can use the copy function. If you start with a quote, you can actually delete the items very easily. If you go with an order, you will have to delete them by hand. There's no automatic zeroing out of line items. Okay, and that copy function exists on the sales quote, the sales order, the credit memo, and the purchase order. One of the things I want to go through is just briefly mention some of the most popular remote access tools that we run into with ACCTivate. And the first one is a product called LogMeIn. LogMeIn has been around for years, and it's a good tool. It's a good way to access your desktop at the office, whether you're at home or whether you're on a tablet or a netbook or anywhere. It is a nice, easy to use system. One thing I'll mention, it's $15 a month, but it's $70 a year, so you'll save a lot of money by actually going with an annual paying upfront for an entire year. But of course, they do have a trial that's available. One of the things that I noticed I think is important is that the Pro Edition, they have a free edition, but I've shown the pricing for that's the current pricing as of May 2013. The Pro Edition is currently required for doing file transfers or remote printing. So I think those are pretty important tools when you start trying to remotely access your system, is being able to easily transfer the files without using yet another system like Dropbox or Box.net. So LogMeIn is a nice system. I would recommend that you look at the Pro pricing model. GoToMyPC is probably the leader. I've been around it a lot more. It seems like it comes up a lot more often. GoToMyPC has actually got a $10 a month plan that's pretty good, that does include some file transfers and advanced functions. You can save a little bit by paying for an entire year, but it's not as significant. So if you're new to that, you might just try GoToMyPC on a month-to-month and see how it works out for you. The software we're using today is also by Citrix Online, which is GoToMeeting or GoToWebinar in today's case. So we do like their products. They're very easy to use. They're cross-platform, so is LogMeIn. So GoToMeeting, GoToMyPC work really well on a variety of different types of computers and devices. If someone asks a question, these pricing are usually per computer. So if you're using LogMeIn and you need to actually connect to 4 or 5 computers, you may actually want to look at some of their other rate plans, such as a corporate account. There is a point at which it's actually more economical to go with a multi-user, multi-computer plan. So these pricing options shown are usually for one person connecting to one computer. One of the things that we always have to mention is the simplest, easiest way, most price-effective way for sure, but it is built into Windows, is remote desktop connection. which you might also see the word Remote Desktop Protocol, or RDP. Now, it's built into Windows Pro, so Windows 8 Pro, Windows 7 Pro, even all the way back to Windows XP Pro editions. The home editions usually do not have a way to connect to the home computer as the server, but you can, at home, have Windows Home Edition and access a Pro Edition or a server running at your office. So again, there's some nuance there, but definitely if you've got questions, talk to your IT people or one of your techie friends that can help you out setting up Remote Desktop. Especially if you have a server with terminal services, it's a really, really good thing to have set up. I recommend, and I've used on both the iPad and Android tablets, there's a product called Pocket Cloud, which is a really good way to access your remote desktop servers, your terminal services. It's by Wyse, which is W-Y-S-E, but it will give you access to multiple remote desktops. Of course, there is a free version, but it only lets you connect to one computer. So kind of paralleling the LogMeIn pricing. So Pocket Cloud, you can connect to one computer for free, but if you want to have 3 or 4 computers, it's going to cost you about $15 to $20. And then the newest player in this space is Google, which is the Chrome Remote Desktop extension. So if you're using Google Chrome, which I highly recommend, I think it's the best browser I've used, and I was a Firefox user before. I've used Internet Explorer for years. Google Chrome is really nice. It's fast. It works on all of my devices. It works on Android, iOS, my Mac at home, my PC at the office. So Google Chrome allows you to connect to any computer running any operating system, it appears. And it's multi-platform, but it's free. It's from Google, so all of their products seemingly are free. So right now, it is free for sure. So if you are using Google Chrome, click on the App Store, the Chrome extensions, and look for the Remote Desktop app. And then it will use your Google account to register your computer. So you will have to go to each computer one time, set it up under your Google account, and then you will be able to have remote access. It's very simple, does not include all the advanced functions and features that LogMeIn and GoToMyPC include, but it's a really easy way to get going from multiple devices. And then a couple things that I showed and mentioned just to kind of close up here. If you're on Windows 7 or earlier and you want to create PDFs, again, not sure why Microsoft never really got that PDF utilities built into the operating system. Maybe pressures from Adobe, but I actually recommend Qt PDF as a free PDF creator. I believe you can actually donate money to that. I don't use it too much. I also have Adobe, but I would absolutely encourage you to look at some of the Adobe alternatives, such as Qt PDF. We do recommend that to some of our customers that need to create PDFs from Crystal reports and do a little bit more than what Crystal can do. So Crystal has built-in PDF writing, but it doesn't do everything that you need. So if you need to do 4x6 labels and some advanced formatting, you might want to find a really nice PDF writer. Also, one of the things that actually came up today in a discussion, I would encourage you to get a password manager. Stop writing your passwords on sticky notes. Stop putting them in text files on your desktop called passwords.txt. I recommend LastPass.com. If you're comfortable with storing passwords online, it works pretty well. Another app that I highly recommend is called KeePass. It's K-E-E pass.info. And it is an offline password manager. So if you do want to keep your passwords on your own computer, KeePass is a pretty good tool. And I actually use KeePass, which is an encrypted data file, but then I also keep it in my Dropbox folder. So it is online. I can get to it from anywhere, but I will be required to have the KeePass software to access it. So again, password managers, take a look at LastPass.com and KeePass.info. And one of the other tools that I'm going to give a plug for, at Alterity, we've switched to Office 365, which is Microsoft's new cloud Office platform. And I couldn't be more happier with it. It is a great tool. We're using Outlook Online. We also have Outlook on the desktop and other email clients. It seems to work really well. And they give you 25 gigabytes per user, which I believe is sufficient for most business email. We have shared calendars that work really well. We're using Link as an instant messaging client. We've been on that for about maybe 2 years, year and a half. As soon as they came out of beta, we jumped on it. And it gives you great corporate instant messaging with archives into your Outlook, so you'll actually have a conversation history. You can also start ad hoc meetings with voice over IP. We use this with our teams. We have some people that work out of the office, and we can actually do webcams and voice over IP and share screens very quickly from our same instant messenger client. Also, one of the things that we're migrating to is their new team site, which is SharePoint Online. It's a very nice, easy to use intranet. It's a way you can share documents with each other, write up some policies and procedures, and share it with your entire company. And it has a very nice permissions. You can set up different permissions levels and private areas in the site. And lastly, but most importantly, it's very cheap. There's two prices right now. Again, this is March 2013 pricing, could change. You can go from anywhere from $5 a month per user up to $12.50 is the small business premium plan. That $12.50 is going to include all of the Office desktop apps, so you don't have to go out and spend $200 to buy Office 2010 or 2013. The $5 plan assumes that you already have Outlook, you already have Word, you want to keep those older versions, and you don't need to be up to date with the latest and greatest all the time. So again, depending on how big your company is and whether you already have Office, you might want to evaluate those two plans. I can't stress this enough. I've got to end with the biggest tip and trick out of ACCTivate that I've got for you today is the help site. We are continuing to put a lot of resources into our help site. You may be even watching this webinar from the help site today. We've put a lot of work in making the search engine work really well. I would recommend that you make a shortcut, bookmark that search engine. It uses a Google custom site search, and you can find a lot of information about ACCTivate very quickly, and we are continually updating that with updates to it almost every day. You can also subscribe via email to be notified for any new articles. Unfortunately, the subscription service we use, it doesn't notify you for every little change we make. You'd probably be overwhelmed with that. So we are only notifying you for brand new articles. And also I found that it works pretty well with some news readers for tablets. So if you've got an Android or an iPad or an iPhone, you might try adding our site, help.activate.com. into your reader, and I recommend Flipboard for the iPad, and I recommend Pulse for Android. I think they're two really great newsreader apps. And the RSS feed that you need for Flipboard, I put it on the screen here. You actually have to type it in. When you go to search, you need to type in http://help.activate.com/feed. Once you type that in, it will create a flipbook for the ACCTivate help site. So again, just a lot of tools for how to get all these tips and tricks to your users, to your coworkers, and hopefully you've learned a little bit today. I know we rushed through a lot of topics, but this will be available as a recorded webinar at help.activate.com/webinars for those of you that are joining the live call. We try to cover a lot of information in these short time, and hope you learned something today. And all of the content, we are trying to make sure it's all available on the help site. So everything we covered today, all the data entry shortcuts, the keyboard shortcuts, the remote desktop tips and tricks, they're all available at help.activate.com, and if they're not today, they will be very soon, because we'll make sure we keep that site up to date. So again, thank you very much for joining us for an hour today for the presentation, and I hope you have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you very much.